Hi everyone, welcome to the Path to Reason. I'm your host Cindy Plaza, and tonight it's open mic show. Hi everyone, welcome to the Path to Reason. I have an echo. Do you guys have one too?
That's
Show.
I hear the echo. The person who doesn't hear the echo is may be the source of the issue. But now there is no echo.
I just killed the second sound stream.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
thank you for that. So, tonight, open mic, because I wanted to make this show before the shooting happened. So I guess we're going to talk about that as well. But my initial thought was to try and understand how someone becomes moderator Green, Ted Cruz, because you have politicians everywhere in the world, and let's assume that they start with roughly the same basics. They have some money, and then they get into politics. And what path leads to fascism on one side and not fascism on so many other sides? And that's the gist of it. I'm trying to understand the psychology behind it, the cultural maybe issues, the social economic issues that could lead to that. I understand a little bit about the history of the US. I know that there's been at least three major events in the US that pushed that way. First was Reagan, who started using racism as a tool to get reelected. Then Bush also, but in a different way. He started with lies and trying to use that in his benefits. And then there's of course Trump, but I'm not sure this explains all of it, and so that's why I wanted to have you here to talk about it. So,
Well, when you brought up Reagan, Reagan did the Reagan tax cuts, and one of the effects of the Reagan tax cuts is that he just gave people money. He gave a lot of affluent people a lot of money. So sure, while the middle class did see some tax relief, what the effects were was this kind of broadening between the very, very, very rich and the everyday American, the everyday person living in the States. And that over time has warped our political system. Money has just flown into the system. It has empowered corporations to pay off politicians to do their will. And the unfortunate truth of our species is that at a certain point, rich people will not care about everyday people, not in any real meaningful way. So as long as they have the I have mine, they really are not too concerned about whether or not everyone else has a slice of the pie. And that's what really differentiates the United States of America from, other democracies, from other European countries, from Canada, from Japan, is this wide disparity in wealth.
Yeah. That sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
and maybe not just wealth, but money in politics.
Well, that's exactly it. It warps, it warps the entire system. So, like for an example, before the Reagan tax cuts, there was no incentive for companies to pay their CEOs an insane amount of money because that money would just go to taxes. So let's say back, and I know that this sounds like ancient history, but this is still within the lifetime for many people still alive, is that corporations would get taxed at a certain rate once they reached so much income, so much revenue. And so it wasn't worth it for them to give CEOs a ton of cash. But after the Reagan tax cuts, they had the extra money, so it's like, sure, we can make superstars and CEOs now. We can make people that make instead of tens of times more than the average worker, hundreds of times more than the average worker.
Yeah. I'd like to add as well that, well, roughly that time, quite a few states in the U.S. More or less killed the unions.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny how that worked out. Is that when you empower the ultra rich, they want to undermine unions, don't they?
That's weird. Yeah, that's weird. I never would have guessed. Yeah.
Who would have thought?
No, of course. I mean, that's no surprise at all. But
right, it is
important. The two work together because, of course, workers' rights have declined immensely in the U.S. I mean, not only in the U.S., by the way, in Europe as well, but not as badly.
Right. And I'm not an economist either, but from what I understand is that when you have globalization, when you have, like different periods in time, there's been globalization, different moments in history, there is typically a widening between the very rich and the very poor to begin with. And once again, there are a host of societal ills that occur when that happens. And if you have a strong government with a strong social safety net, you can lessen the effects, the disruptions in everyday life for the everyday worker. But once again, here in the States, we don't have a good social safety net. And so what happens is that you have a bunch of people who were once middle class, factory workers, and now they're basically working menial jobs. I mean, and no labor is menial, but they're working what is low-paying jobs, and they're angry, and they're angry about it, and you can see the manifestation of this in the political rhetoric on the right. Right, this is what fuels fascism: is this unreasoning anger.
And I think exactly how you laid that out in an economic sense butts up it right to where my first thought was, which is an undercurrent ideology of me as a specific type of American deserves more than other types of Americans. Now, generally, that type of American is white, Christian, wealthy, but that undercurrent of an ideology has been prevalent in our country since the beginning. And we have told people that isn't true. We have raised kids, and we have told the next generation after generation that in reality, we fixed all of that. We got rid of all of those problems, and they don't exist anymore. And while we did that to the mass public, the undercurrent had been growing in strength. And when it got to that point where we are now seeing, due to, again, a lot of tax policies that Reagan put through, although the current Republican Party is nothing like Reagan's party, I think, anymore. But
it's a logical extension of it.
Absolutely it is, because it fueled that kind of switch economically, and that kind of played right into that. They're taking your jobs, they're coming to destroy you and your children. And one thing you can do is you can look at the economic stability that rural white individuals in the United States have had, and that decline over the last decade and a half. Now, again, that's not to say that they're in any way, shape, or form justified in the crap conclusions that they come to. It's just, that's why there were so many people out there in a social sciences sense that when Trump won, they were not as surprised as the average person was. It's because they had seen these trends kind of going back and forth. So,
yeah. So basically, go ahead, Andrew.
Well, I'm saying is that one of the issues with the United States of America that inhibits our ability to talk about class issues is, of course, race. And race is like the cardinal sin, the primal sin, secular sin of the United States of America. So it really does affect every single conversation that we can have about class.
Do you think that this trend to other people um, to find whatever reason you have to dismiss them because they're different is now part of the American identity, and therefore it will be impossible to remove?
I don't think so. I think that, I mean, I'm not a glib-eyed optimist by any sense. I feel like this Trumpism and this particular iteration of the Republican Party, they are desperate. They know that and this is why they're trying to make a grab for power, because if you look at it, they cannot win a national election without cheating. When you look at Trump, losing the popular vote, when you look at Bush, the younger, losing the popular vote against Gore, of all people, they know. They know that on a national level that they have to use non-democratic ways to obtain power. And you can see that in the Supreme Court. You can see that in the Supreme Court and how they're trying to inhibit, mail-in voting, trying to keep, people who aren't WASPs or people who aren't white, they're trying to keep minorities from ethnic minorities from voting. But if we are only able to hold it down and to keep the country progressing forward, then we will eventually end up like the UK. Well, maybe not like the UK, but like Norway, maybe like Iceland, maybe like New Zealand, maybe like Australia. But they're desperate, and people do desperate things, and that's why there was the assault on the Capitol on January 6th. They are desperate.
And I think
people are dangerous.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, you're right with that this isn't, while it seems like this has been a huge loss for so many of us on the more humanist side of things, on the liberal side of things, on the you can't come in and put me in change just because you don't like the book I'm reading type stuff. That side feels as if they have just lost almost 100 years worth of the battle. And I totally understand that 100%. I mean, I am demoralized by some of these. I mean, recently I was talking with some other people about another terrible Supreme Court case that was decided about new evidence being able to be presented for inmates. And my gosh, it's infuriating. It's absolutely infuriating.
What's infuriating about the case, and tell me if I'm wrong about this particular case, is that the court threw out precedent.
Just blatantly did not give a crap about one of the most underlying principles of what is supposedly our most high governing body, the Supreme Court. They just ruled on something like this literally like 9 years ago. So,
and this is how I think, having seen the secular and the humanist community for some time, is that there has been complacency. We've been lying to ourselves, or maybe we've been ignorant about it. We've been thinking that, we have all these Supreme Court decisions. We have the law on our side. And you know what? I hate to tell you something. If Trump era didn't tell us anything, it's like the law doesn't matter. Precedent doesn't matter. What matters is that whether or not people believe in law and order, whether or not people believe in small d democracy, those and politics trumps everything. And I'm sorry for the pun. Politics trumps everything else. Basically, it's about winning hearts and minds, and we can't take refuge behind, like I said, Supreme Court decisions or laws.
Yeah, and one of the things, just kind of going back to Cindy's question and where you kind of laid it out, the right wing in the United States knows that they are waning in power. They know, which is one reason why they spent 10, 15 years with this particular project of capturing the Supreme Court, and why they've spent another decade and a half creating these self-referential think tanks, and so nonpartisan secular think tanks, as they call them, but are all just directly funded by a handful of different hardcore right people. But The reason that they have done that is because even with something seemingly at the time so incredibly polarizing, like we had never seen before, this whole Affordable Care Act, Obamacare debate that occurred, right? So when that occurred initially, there were people practically saying they would rather die in the streets from the most curable thing ever, a splinter, right? Than take that government handout, than take that. It was only a few years later that we are literally seeing the average Republican voter in rural Kentucky, in rural Ohio, that are standing up and saying to their candidates, hey, actually don't take this away from me. This has been really helpful. And I think that trend is going to keep continuing, where people are actually receiving the benefits of good roads or good schooling, or we finally stop treating prisoners like they're animals, and we decide that, hey, they're still people, they did some bad things, or we stop just letting people die in the streets simply because they don't have a sandwich. I think when people do see those results time and time again, you cannot put that genie back in the box, but you still have to fight all the assholes in the process that are just going, no, it's not, no, this isn't good. So
I'll say this about the Affordable Care Act is that it was probably the single most significant step towards a secular United States of America than anything else, because I think most of us who are watching this or on the panel know that the stronger the social safety net, the far likelier it is for a country to become secular. So the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, made life a lot less miserable for a lot of people. And that's just one of the reasons why, the states are becoming more, or is becoming more secular.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And it is really, again, it's the progress that has been made has been phenomenal, and it is absolutely wonderful in a lot of different avenues. But it hurts so much more, I think, when you get tricked, somebody kind of fools you and they tell you like, hey, we're going to play a game. And then you start to play the game and then they just run away with all your money or whatever, that's like, oh man, that's messed up. But I didn't know, you didn't say, if you walk up to me, tell me blatantly in broad daylight, hey, I'm about to mug you. Do you want to play this game? And then I play the game, or better yet, somebody next to me says, oh yeah, man, you gotta play this game, it's totally great, and then he does exactly what he says he was going to do. It's like, that's really frustrating, man, because
that's the nature of this kind of pernicious kind of late stage, end stage capitalism, is that people don't realize that they're playing, and if they do think that they're playing, they don't realize how the cards are stacked against them. The best games, at least that I like to play, are the ones against people who don't know that they're playing the game, so that, hey, I'm winning, and you didn't even know that you're playing the game to begin with.
Yeah, I'm not as optimistic as you guys, because when I look at the trend of voting suppression, of gerrymandering, and the extent to which Trump managed to put justices, to have elected officials that will be in charge of the actual election, be there, I don't see how Democrats can prevent the GOP to win in November, and then in 2 years. And if that and when that happens, I don't see how you can come back from that.
I gotta tell you, and I mentioned it. I'm gonna do a cheap plug for my own channel, the Laughing and Disbelief channel. But I said the other day, I think Mike Pence might, and I hate to say this, my mouth hurts when I say this, but I think Mike Pence might have saved the Republic for a second time, by going up against Trump in one of the Georgia races, the Georgia's governor race. Pence's Pence's Kemp. The candidate's name is last name is Kemp, and Pence was supporting that candidate while Trump was supporting a Trumpist candidate, which is his name is Perdue. It was a complete, a lunatic. Kemp is not a great guy, but at least he believes in counting votes. The secretary of the Raffsperger, the person who stood fast against Trump pressuring him back in
Was reelected.
He was reelected. He won his primary.
Yes.
So those are good signs. And once again, I can tell you about why it is. I can talk both ends of this argument. I can tell you why it's not going to work, and I can tell you why I'm hopeful it will work. I don't know if there's like odds makers in Vegas who have figured out the odds on this, but there's a very strong argument for the states descending into some kind of Turkey, not the bird, but the country kind of authoritarian style of government. Yeah.
Well, and for me, I think, one of the things that comes to my mind right away, and I've had a couple of friends say something similar over the last couple of weeks. One of which being Stephanie Helms, if any of y'all know that wonderful lady. But she was talking about how what really needs to be done right now for all of those of us who are truly disheartened by the seemingly continuingly fervent right-wing swing that is going all over the world. There's not a place on this globe right now I couldn't mention about a handful of different politicians or ideologies that are gaining traction. We see some good news here and there, right? I was really excited to see a change of government for Australia. That'll be cool. Let's see what happens. Hey, great. It looks like, the Tories maybe don't have as much, kind of waning maybe in some popularity over in the UK. Okay, great. Let's see it. We're seeing a handful of different candidates that are running completely against Trump, at least in the sense of Trump's grip on the party, right? There was a period of time for the GOP that if Trump pointed, that person got elected. And we're at the very least seeing that grip seem to decline. And all of that, fantastic. But again, just kind of tying it back into your thoughts a second ago, Cindy, I think the answer is we have to do the unsexy things. We have to write the fucking letters, and we have to show up at the meetings, and we have to vote. We have to do the boring things that suck, and nobody wants to go out and knock doors and get 500,000 signatures so that we can fix the pothole in front of the elementary school that has literally caused 2 bus crashes. Nobody wants to do that. That sucks. I get that. You get that. The difference in the last 2 decades in terms of the right wing in the United States specifically and the left wing has been that the right wing has been super, super organized when they have been trying to go out towards the public. They get out there and they stand up on a stage and they yell how oh my gosh, they're coming for us, and they're going to take this from you, and they're going to take this from you, and that is mobilizing.
And that's an effect of, once again, of money in politics and money and this disparity of wealth in the country, is that the right wing has the money. People are being paid to say the same bullet points, the same points, the same rhetorical points together to make it more powerful. And the left doesn't have anything like that here. We're not being funded by the Koch brothers.
No, but I mean, the good thing, doing the right thing, weirdly enough, you don't need all the money for that. You need the people to do that, and you need to inspire the people to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But eventually, just putting in the effort and giving a good example, possibly even inspired by, good rhetoric, that's the way to get there. I mean, rhetoric is, of course, the bit that the right has down pat.
Yeah.
I mean, it's awful rhetoric.
Yep.
But they got it pat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They say the lines over and over, and they say them well, and they keep harping on them. And anytime you want to have some more nuanced conversation, they take the first thing that you say, and then it's instantly, you see, and that's why they're, and it's like, yeah, that's just BS, you know? But yeah, the answer is we have to get out. And if we want the trash to be picked up, we start a freaking committee and we post it on Facebook and we go pick up the trash. Like, that's going to be one of the biggest things that helps.
I want to speak to this idea about storytelling and about making these emotional arguments, because and this is what the Republicans do. This is what the right wing do. They speak emotionally. Well, we have a tendency of how much can I swear on this? This isn't if I can, but how much?
Yeah, you can.
Right. So we tend to word fuck people with facts, and there's nothing more detrimental to the cause than word fucking people with facts. And this is what a lot of people, I was listening to a scientist on National Public Radio today, and it's like, you're making sense, but you're not moving the dial at all. You're not changing any hearts and minds. And look, everyone, if you're gonna speak to someone that doesn't believe the same way that you are, if you have a story, if you have a powerful story, it's better to lead off with that. And this is what Extinction Rebellion tells people. This isn't just me. It's like, your most powerful weapon that you have is your story. And if you want to supplement that with facts, that's great. But if you have a story to tell, that's what people want to hear. That's what people who don't understand our position want to hear. They don't want to be word fucked.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I did a video a couple months ago talking about why the right is trending in the world, and one of the reasons was that the left has no big issue to gather behind compared to the right, and that's one of the big issues as well, because abortion, gay marriage, all that is very powerful to drive people to vote, because in the US you have single issue voters. So there are those topics where you can you just say the word and everyone is behind you. On the left, there's not much left to fight. It's just we don't want to become an AIDS country, but that's not it's not a positive claim. If you want to move people, you have to say, okay, we're going to have this, but fighting something that's slowly happening, that doesn't talk to people.
No. I mean, in that respect, of course, recent presidential elections in France made it quite clear that it turned out quite hard to at least not vote for the fascist candidate.
Yeah, again, another place that it was one of those, like, I was glad, obviously, that it came out Macron instead of Le Pen, but still, the numbers were...
Macron is not a nice man.
No, and yeah, it was like, A, the numbers were too close, and B, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, so we didn't get that horrible person. Who did we get?
Another horrible person.
I mean, okay. But yeah, that is another issue that I'm not sure exactly what we do, especially in the United States. There is very much a class divide in terms of the political elites and the average Joe Schmo. And yeah, don't get me wrong, there are definitely those moments and times where you have that, rags to riches, type story. Somebody that completely never had anything to do with politics whatsoever, wasn't in any way, shape, or form advantaged, worked their whole freaking lives, tried as much as they could. Finally, after 14 campaigns, or there are a few of those, but it is very much more divided these days than it seems to have been in the past. And maybe that's partially just the political narrative that we tell ourselves in the United States?
No, we've been having a low grade civil war for I don't know, at least a couple of years at this
Well, yeah, well, that, yeah, true.
You know,
Yeah, it's a cold civil war.
This is a we're kind of like in a small pause right now because the Democrats are basically in charge of the executive branch, at least can fend off the Republicans and both of the other in the legislature.
Yeah,
But
we're
let's
supposed
not
to
fool
be.
ourselves. This is still, this is like maybe a little pause in the Civil War. And to tell you the truth, we have to, it isn't just the Democrats. When you're in a competitive game, you also you also hope for the incompetency of your enemy.
Mm.
And I have to tell you, Vladimir Putin has probably done more for the Democrats here in the United States of America than any Democrat has by invading Ukraine or continuing the invasion of Ukraine, and getting the Republicans to basically say whether or not they're for NATO or against NATO, whether or not they're for authoritarianism or they're against authoritarianism, whether they're for Putin's kind of Christo-fascism or they're against it. So yeah, that has, and I'll contend that a defeat against Putin or Putin's defeat would be a defeat against Trumpism. And I don't think that's an original thought on my part, but I'll say it anyway.
And something that I think is necessary right now, if we really want to stem the tide of right-wing populism that is encircling the globe, then we as a global community need to stand up and say, fuck you, Putin. And we need to back that up. So I have been glad that there has been some really large support, not only in the US, but seemingly worldwide. But I worry that we're so far into it at this point that we're getting complacent. We're just kind of getting, I'm hearing more people float the idea of just ceding the Donbass, right? Which is,
that's Muniching. That's just, for anyone who doesn't know what Munich is, as when the Allied powers basically told Nazi Germany to take a chunk out of Czechoslovakia without Czechoslovakia saying it was okay. And that's of all people, Henry Kissinger, the guy who said he had a freaking mystical plan, a secret plan to get us out of Vietnam. This is the same guy who had this secret plan, which he never had a plan to get us out of Vietnam. And he's the one who says that we should be implying that we should be telling the Ukrainians that they should be willing to cede some of their territory to Putin.
That's a firm no, of course. That is indeed Munich all over again.
Munich all over it. Yeah.
It is not a feasible option.
No.
And because it isn't one that, so again, it's just, we're kind of just running worldwide now, but I think there's a good tie-in. But I think one of the things that is being heavily watched right now is whether or not we'll continue to see a right-wing nationalist move in India with the BJP, and whether or not the CCP are going to use this opportunity with Ukraine to kind of shore up some of their territory. They've already been making fake islands in the South China Sea for years now. So it's like one international event where the global community kind of says, well, you did have big guns and you did come in, so we'll just give it to you. And Xi Jinping is all over that. And that is not something that we can allow to play out worldwide. We have to no longer exist in a world where 5 leaders of another country can go sit in a room and just cut out sections of the world and just tell people and their families, it's old school.
We've seen what happens when we have these quote unquote these great power politics. You get World War I, you get World War II. This is what happens. And that's Putin. What Putin wants to go back to is this kind of great power politics where major powers can just kick smaller ones around. And if Trump gets back into office, It's difficult for people in other countries, and it's difficult for everyday Americans to understand how much power the president has when it comes to dealing with other countries. Yeah, it has imperial-like powers, and so if there's a Republican that comes in, if there's a Trumpist kind of president, you could easily see all the effort that we put in to support Ukraine could just vanish. It could just go.
Yeah.
And even even when the Republicans get into power, if they get into power after the midterms, it becomes more difficult to send Ukraine money.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm reasonably optimistic that Europe will, Europe being the European Union and pretty much Western Europe and anyway, not Russia, will stay at Ukraine's side for the foreseeable future. But when we look at things like NATO, I mean, it's a bit of a roller coaster ride, NATO, in the last few months. I mean, if you'd asked me half a year ago, I'd say NATO. Well, it's not dead, but it does smell funny.
Yeah.
And that changed quite a bit.
Yeah, very quickly. Huh?
Yeah.
But with, let's say, another term for Trump, I'm not so sure that will stay.
Yeah.
No, but we have 2 years before, 2.5 years before that happens.
Yes.
So,
and by the way, by that time, we know quite a bit more what will happen in Ukraine.
For sure.
It may well be all behind us.
but yeah, I think by then Ukraine will have won the war.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really. That's
possible.
where I'm really hoping that it comes to, because again, just kind of tying all of that right-wing populism globally back to what we're seeing the GOP specifically kind of enact lately is just touching back on what Andy said earlier about how Putin may have helped out the Democrats and the left wing of this country more than he realizes, because with a strong, focused United States effort saying we will not allow Vladimir Putin to do these atrocities, we will not allow this to continue, we need to support these people. That is an easy tie back into like, hey, that's interesting. So we also have these people here in the US that are dying because of like opioid addiction or something. Don't you think we should help them? It's like, well, I mean, okay. It's like, yeah, but remember, we help the people in Ukraine, and it's because of like human rights and how we should all treat each other well and kind of shit. It's like, so I see a huge rejection of what's happening from Vladimir Putin and the authoritarian populism side. In the United States, I see that as being just massively, massively helpful. If that's the effort that we end up getting. If what we get is after this election, we now are completely divided in the branches and we can't do anything for the next 2 years, I don't know. I don't know what that gives us, in the next presidential election.
There's one hope is that if Ukraine indeed won that war by then, Democrats will be able to use that as a victory point.
Mm-hmm.
And usually presidents who win a war, they tend to be reelected. And so that's a good
capitalize
on good
that.
Reason to be optimistic.
And I mean, what I've been thinking is that, I mean, stuff like, well, essentially this kind of international solidarity and the message to, well, internal solidarity is something you can mobilize. And I think you should. I mean, I have no recipe exactly how to do it. It's not quite simple as that, but that is the idea.
Yeah, for sure. And again, that is something that is lacking lacking on the more left, more humanist, broadly kind of global society type side of politics. It is hard to focus all of that into a single kind of spear that moves forward, whereas it's very easy to say, hey, vote for everything where it sounds like they're coming to take our guns. And that's why the NRA is so effective in the US. It has nothing to do with their amount of money, because they really don't spend as much as a lot of other lobbying groups.
Nope.
It's because they are able to focus in hardcore and like a dog with a bone, grab it and not let go.
No.
So,
this is one of the things that irritates me. One of my grievances, I'm going to air some of my grievances, is that when I talk to skeptics or atheists and they tell me that they're not political, they're here in the States, so they say that they're not political. And it's like, well, that's a very interesting statement, is that you are political whether you know it or not, and whether you like it or not. Being part of a religious minority, congratulations, you're now in it. You got skin in the game. Just because, let's face it, you might be white and you're an atheist and you don't think that the rain of shit that's going to fall down on people if the Christo-fascists take over will affect you. Well, guess what? It will. It'll affect your kids. If you have kids, it'll affect your grandchildren. If you have grandchildren, that we got to wake other skeptics and humanists and atheists up to the idea that we are political animals, and that you just being the fact that you're an atheist, that means that you are already fighting, or you're either winning or you're losing. You're either fighting or you're getting clobbered.
Yep.
That gives me an idea. Maybe we should make one big event as with all the atheist community in October, to tell people to go and vote.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd love that. Yeah.
To go register to vote now. I mean, you got to register to vote, and then when it actually comes time, you got to go vote.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that would be really good, is having a blatantly non-religious organization in the United States that is 100% focused on reminding everybody, hey man, do you go to church regularly? Oh no, not really feeling it. Yeah, me either. Hey, your vote really freaking matters, right, kid? Because you do realize that your flavor of what it means to be an American is no longer going to be served on the menu. They are actively going to be restricting things that you think are fundamental to what this country is about. Sure, there was a document that people signed and fought a war over 200 years ago. They don't give a shit about that. They don't care about that. They are blatantly not interested in preserving precedent and law, common law as we have had it. And
except the Second Amendment.
Well, except there. Yeah,
well, even then, they don't care. They don't care about the, once again, how the Second Amendment has changed over time is criminal. Back in the 1970s, I was talking with Professor Alan Lichtman. He wrote a book about gun rights. He was on my channel a while back. Another cheap plug for my channel, by the way. And I think it was back in 1974, 1975, maybe, that the
NRA. You had a channel back then already?
What's that?
You had a channel back then already?
Oh, right. but basically, there were a bunch of the NRA, the institution itself, got the Central Committee. It got there was a little mini revolution within the NRA, and a bunch of radicals took it over.
Central Committee.
And they started pushing this kind of insane reinterpretation of the Second Amendment from there on forward.
And it's almost at the same time that abortion became a tool by the right and the religious right to gather around again. Yeah. So what happened then? To make sure, is it just coincidence that so many things changed in that time, or was there a trigger? Or
well, there was a blowback. There was a blowback from the Civil Rights Act from the 1960s. The Republicans basically, for those of you who don't know about the states and the history, is that during the 1960s, 67 or so, 65, 64, there was the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. And what happened is that the Democrats used to be in control of the South. And once LBJ and the Democrats got behind civil rights legislation, the Republicans said, well, we're going to be racist. We're going to really drill down on this. And so that's why they became the Southern Party. And they switched roles, basically. They switched positions. And part of that, the gun rights, the reinterpretation of the Second Amendment, fighting against Roe versus Wade, this is their way of clawing back. If they have their way, they would get rid of the New Deal too while they're at it.
And that's that ideological undercurrent. And then again, remember that around that time, we would have finally gotten instituted and seen the effects of broadly a lot of the policies that were coming from FDR and a lot of the ultimate ramifications that would finally come into play. And one of those ramifications is that it was no longer just going to be the white people who had some money and owned some businesses and had some rights. And so now in the 80s, again, not only is there that ideological undercurrent that is finally gaining some more traction, but you're able to see exactly the boogeyman that they're calling for, economically speaking. And so just the combination of those two together, like, yep, perfect, great. It's going to result into now we're really, really against gay people. We're really, really against black people. We're really, really against poor people. Like, we love our guns. Like, yeah, it's one of those, like, you couldn't make it up because it seems almost too absurd that all of this would come together so perfectly and fit together to deliver us this dystopian nightmare. But yeah, and again,
it's all sadly familiar. You look at how small R republics commit suicide. It's by factionalism. It's from, I just finished binging through the History of Rome podcast by Michael Duncan, 192 episodes. Great stuff in case you have 72 hours to listen through it.
Yeah. Okay.
But, the Roman Republic fell, was undermined and became the empire, partly because of too much money in the system, too much money going into the hands of the ultra rich and them figuring out that they don't need poor people. They just don't need poor people, and their concerns were not taken into the equation that undermined what democratic institutions they had, and you get a strong man. It doesn't matter if you're in 30 BC or if you're in, when was Napoleon, like 1789, in the 1790s. When republics have pressure placed upon them, it doesn't matter if you're in Germany in 1923 or 1929 or 1933. When republics have this kind of factionalism and the government seizes up and can't do anything, then strong people, strong men, emerge. Yeah. Strong men emerge.
That's inevitable.
Yeah, it is. So that's why it's important to try to manage the undercurrent, the how things become these kind of factions, how to manage it.
I mean, what people rather tend to overlook is that strongman sounds a good idea when your republic or your nation is in danger or factionalized or something like that. But no strongman is your friend.
No. Strongmen just care about strongmen. They just care about themselves, in their own interests. Whether you're talking about Xi in China, in China, or Erdogan in Turkey. You look at what Erdogan's done to his economy in Turkey.
Yeah.
Right.
He's ruining it.
Complete rubbish. Rubbish. But people don't care. I mean, his supporters don't care.
No.
And it's interesting to me, and I'd love Cindy Hine, please tell me on this. In the U.S., we really don't talk about class as much, like finances personally and familially and so forth. Like, that's very much not something that we talk about. And I'm wondering, over where y'all are, is that more of a conversation, or is like here it is definitively one of the shittiest things you can do to a human being to just say something like, oh yeah, about how much do you make? Like, give me an estimate. Like, I don't need the exact dollar amount, but are you making like 20K, 40K, $1 million? Like, you will get into fistfights with people here for stuff like that.
It's not our favorite subject at a dinner party.
That's fair.
And even in the office, we ordinarily don't discuss exactly how much we make while doing our job.
Okay.
Occasionally we do, when we sort of find out that, hey, he's doing exactly my job, but he's paid twice as much.
Yeah. Well, that is a rare occurrence when we find out something like that here. So
then we start to talk a bit more, and things ordinarily will change. Not directly, but either people will walk away or start a strike or something like that.
I think it's safe to say that people over there have more worker protections than people over here in the States.
Firmly.
And that's why I was wondering if maybe in Europe there's a little bit more of a willingness to kind of have those conversations.
Yes.
And because again, here it is, you can work with somebody side by side for 10 years. Ask that dude what he's making, and oh my God, your friendship is over.
I'll say this: from what I've seen, younger people are more comfortable talking about those kind of issues than people my age. Yeah.
Yes, that is very much true.
I think one of the reasons is that in the US, it seems that the amount of money you earn is tied to your value as a human being, and that doesn't exist in Europe. And that's probably the biggest change between the two mentalities.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely low income or high income doesn't make much difference in your, let's say, worth for society. There is class bits like that. I mean, particularly the real rich. And let me tell you, in the Netherlands, the differences between the rich and the poor are pretty big. Possibly the largest in the world. Even we don't have billionaires, as far as I'm aware, but we have quite a few millionaires compared to, masses of people who make 20,000 euros a year, something like that. I think 27,000 euros per year is modal income. That's not particularly rich. Then again, we have very good services for which we pay quite a bit of tax.
I was having this conversation at work, and the worst thing that I can do is actually start having conversations at work. And we were talking about and this is like someone from the main office in San Diego came in for a couple of weeks. Really sweet person. We were just talking, and she was talking about going to go visit to Texas. And I'm like, I would never move to Texas. And she goes, well, it's really cheap in Texas. And I go, yeah, it's really cheap in Ukraine right now too. But I don't think I would buy property in the Donbass region. But it just goes, it's cheap for a reason, everyone. Texas is cheap for a reason. States, red states are cheap for a reason. It's because they don't put anything into education or healthcare or basic.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about that earlier. I mean, we have our nation. I mean, our roads are perfect. No potholes, no collapsing bridges, no collapsing buildings for that matter. We have a working general health system. You don't go bankrupt because you fall ill.
2/3 of all bankruptcies, and I love saying this because it's so horrific, and I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it over and over again. 2/3 of all bankruptcies here in the States have to do with medical bills. 2/3 of them. A cursory look on GoFundMe, and you will see cancer care.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. That's what it is, and
Yes.
people should understand that it's disgusting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
And
I look at that in horror.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Hein, most of those things you were talking about a second ago, like the concept of well-functioning roads and schools and being able to go to the doctor without literally spending all of your money, and like
Transport.
that is something that I have. So I'm in the South. I'm in Tennessee. And as bad as Texas and Florida can be, trust me, Tennessee does all of those things and worse. Every law you can think of that dehumanizes trans children, every bill you can think of that makes it harder for you if you are not white, cis, hetero, Protestant, rich. Yeah, I mean, believe me, Tennessee has them. But like the idea that all of those things being provided to the average Joe public, that was told to me for years as to how fundamentally destructive these things were for a well-functioning country, because of the ideology in my area.
Yeah.
It would be a regular thing just casually out at the grocery store. Somebody would just mention how Europe is falling apart because they just give all their money to silly things like pencils for their children or something.
So,
Yeah.
couple days ago, I watched a video from Le Monde, which is probably the most serious French news outlet, and they made a pretty good video about how our taxes are used and who pays the more taxes, the rich or the poor. And it turns out that between the lowest 10% and the highest 10%, the difference is threefold, which is very, very, very low. So there is a lot of taxes, but there is a lot of redistribution in terms of services, and whether it's police, whether it's firemen, whether it's education, roads, healthcare, of course, pensions. Everything is funded by, well, most things are funded by the amount of taxes we pay. And because of that, we have one of the least extreme revenues countries. And I don't think French people are much aware of this, because if they were, they probably wouldn't complain so much about certain things. But I think that needs to be said in the US. I mean, the American people needs to know that this is how it works, and it works.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. You know, I don't want this to be an intervention for secular rarity, but, you know, secular, we have space up here in Massachusetts for you.
It's cold up there. That's the problem. It gets so cold.
That is the price. That is the price right there.
Yeah, it's like I tell everybody, like Tennessee is beautiful in terms of like the hills and the trees and, you know, all of that.
We have those up here.
Yeah. It's the people and the laws. not worth it. Not worth it. If you're thinking about moving here, like, just don't. No, I mean, I will say that with certain cities in Tennessee and Texas, you are seeing an influx of people coming from way out west in the US. And it tends to be, although not 100%, there are many states that buck this trend, but it tends to be that we see people that have lived their whole lives, especially the last 30 to 40 years out west, they're a little bit more on that kind of liberal side of the spectrum, especially on the social things, which is really, really valuable. And we are seeing that as the last few years, we've had more and more people come into my area. Middle Tennessee is one of the fastest growing places in the whole country right now, for a lot of different reasons. One, specifically, it's been so cheap compared to places because our freaking roads are literally falling apart. A couple of years ago, I was driving to work one morning, 7 a.m. on the road, and there is a fire hydrant at a stoplight where it's just pouring out water, y'all. Like water is just literally dozens and dozens of gallons of water are just like pouring out everywhere. So it was, it wasn't like somebody came by, turned it on and left. No, it just burst because we hadn't upkept stuff.
Well, you raised a good point about migration. That's how Colorado turned blue.
Right.
That's how Colorado turned blue, is by people from California going to Colorado.
Yeah. And that's kind of exactly where I was going, is like, I love the people who are able to get out of bad situations in bad places in the US or worldwide. But it is also so important that we fight in our home as well, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it's awesome that let just pick a random country. It's awesome that all the wonderful things that are here. But if literally the country right next door, the average citizen is just being slaughtered in the streets because of some asshole religious nutcase, like, that's not okay. And we don't live in a world where we can be okay with other people constantly day in and day out receiving that kind of treatment. And we need to exist where we give a shit about each other.
And this is the problem with blue states, and this is the superpower of red states, is that red state people, and I'm going to use a broad brush here. Red state people are more angry than people in blue states. And don't get me wrong, we're angry up here, right? There's a lot of massholes.
It should be.
But because we have a higher standard of living, and we're just not angry. We're just not as angry. So it's easier for us to be complacent. And people are jazzed up. People are jazzed up in red states because they're just getting screwed. And mind you, that behavior gets shunted in all these maladaptive ways, but they just have this in them that a lot of us just go like, I don't think I understand that.
I mean, this reminds me of a communist slogan in the Dutch politics of the 1970s. When you're angry, you must do angry.
Yeah.
And there is something very powerful in that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I'm a big advocate of anger. It isn't just because I'm in comedy, but I'm a big advocate of anger. And so, but I talked to a bunch of people, very nice humanists and atheists. It's difficult sometimes to get our people jazzed, to get our people amped up about things.
Yeah. Then again, your nation did it before. You got behind FDR and the New Deal, and that, as I understand it, was widely supported. I mean, not completely, but that never happens.
It's possible, but what is troubling is it seems that, specifically amongst Republicans, and especially amongst Trump Republicans, they just woke up and realized that there's no man behind the curtain. Is that basically and how many times did we see this during the Trump era? Is that, wow, he's breaking all these mores, all of these, not really laws, but just how it's always been done. And it turns out that a lot of our system is just based on how it's always been done.
Yeah.
And the economics, once again, boils down to when you have the super wealthy, they figure out, wait a minute, it doesn't apply to us.
Yeah.
We can just break the rules.
The only reason FDR did not serve 4 full terms in the US, 16 years worth of being president, was because he died after the 4th one. Like, that was the reason. And it was and up until then, we had just been going along fine and dandy. We were like, well, gosh, I mean, old Washington left after 2. Everybody else should we codify that? No, why do that?
And it's been so crazy. It's like there's been several presidents, and I'm going to bring up Andy Jackson, and what I'm probably going to be talking about. But it gets to the point that different sections of our government really don't have to obey the law either. Andrew Jackson, there was a Supreme Court ruled that Native tribes couldn't get kicked off their land. And Andrew Jackson said, well, I can do whatever I want because I have the military behind me, and just completely ignored their ruling. And you get the Trail of Tears. Right. So, yeah, you have these mores. And once people realize that they're just things that we all agree on, it's like if you're a parent out there and there comes a crystallization point that your 16 or 17 or 13 or 14-year-old realizes, hey, I can do what I want, basically, as long as I can suffer the consequences. And that is the most wonderful and horrific moment whatsoever. It's like, you can't really do a whole lot, can you? Yeah, right? Yeah. I mean, this is all somewhat, I have to agree to this.
Yeah, that's kind of like when you call somebody out the first time at the grocery store or something because they like just ran in front of you and grabbed the last box of, crackers or whatever. And you're like, hey, man, like I was grabbing for it. Like, you can't do that. And you're just hoping that the person like agrees to the same rules of society and is just like, yeah, totally. As opposed to the person that turns around, rips their shirt off and just like starts yelling at you like a madman. Yeah. Right. Like you're like, what do I do here? Like, yeah, I can call the cops if they hit me, but am I going to get like beat up in the meantime?
There is this, and I don't want to bring up Jean-Jacques Rousseau, but I'm going to bring him up for a minute. The I think 18th century philosopher, and there's basically two types of laws. There are civilization laws. There's civilization codes and conduct, and then there's the law of the jungle. And once we decide that we're not going to follow laws, right? Civilization laws, it becomes the rule of the jungle. That's what happens. And I don't know if Trumpism isn't just a reversion back to, the rules of whoever has the most power is going to get their way. I don't know what is.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it for me, it's pretty obvious that Trumpism is exactly after, might make right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Because, again, this was something that we had seen in a couple of different aspects. But, I mean, one most recently is the Tea Party. Back in 2010 and 2012, there were multiple prominent figures on the right-wing side of the United States government that were able to go on television and pay bunch of money to make political ads where they are directly calling for physical violence against their opponent.
Yeah.
That type of thing happened, and those people won. There was an individual who is now, I believe, the governor of Montana. He might be the senator, but Greg Gianforte, or however you say his last name, but he literally body slammed a reporter from The Guardian.
I remember that, yeah.
He picked the man up and threw him to the ground in a government building. And the man still not only won that election, but a few years later became governor or senator or whatever prominent position he has now. That is infuriating that we live in a time where that is what we consider acceptable. Now, go ahead.
Yeah, I recently picked up that Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, that woman is, of course, incurably insane.
Yeah,
but apparently she said that the best way to solve the problems is to kill Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, and then was confused as to why Twitter took down her tweet or suspended her. Like, was confused about that. Had no idea.
Well,
I just thought that it's quite ironic that for a country that has the biggest prison population in the world, that there is so much impunity for so many crimes.
Yeah. Well, the strong, I don't know which Greek wrote this, but the strong do what they will. The weak suffer what they must. And, that's what happens when you have this kind of system.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But this is, where we are in the country, at least how I feel, is like we're very similar to where we were in the 1850s, in terms of, and that's not very hopeful either. See, Cindy, I'm going to play the negative card right here. Talking about political violence, I was just looking up the caning of Charles Sumner, which was a senator from Massachusetts, and he got beaten down by someone from South Carolina, Representative Preston Brooks. He got caned on the floor of the Senate because Charles Sumner, of course, being from Massachusetts in the 1850s, was an abolitionist. And after the beating down, the fans of Preston Brooks would send him canes in the mail or gift him canes. And so even though it's crazy, once again, this is my negative card I'm playing. Even though it's crazy now, it could get a lot crazier.
Yeah. It absolutely can. And again, I think one of the things that I don't know if it's like good that we have these markers and indicators, but I guess kind of, if you want to fight it, but like there are a handful of different academic papers out there about a good dozen indicators of fascism.
Oh yeah.
And they are really, really well laid out, really well researched, and those are really important to remember, because it's not just a random, we just pulled something, out of the dark and just said, oh, look, here we go. We think if this happens, you'll probably have fascists later. It's like, no, we have looked at every single instance of this hardcore authoritarian, screw you, I will beat you down in the streets if necessary to get my agenda. And these are the things that they all have in common. And we're at a place now where at least half of those boxes have been ticked off by a certain wing of our country.
Yeah.
I put the link to that in the chat because
awesome.
That's a very, very useful read, the early warning signs of fascism.
That's exactly what I'm thinking of. Yep.
Yes, you said at least half of the boxes are ticked. Let's see, powerful and continuing nationalism, disdain for human rights, identification of enemies as unifying cause, supremacy of the military, rampant sexism, control mass media, obsession with national security, religion and government intertwined, corporate power protected, labor power suppressed, disdain for intellectuals and the arts, obsession with claims and punishment, rampant cronyism and corruption, and fraudulent elections.
So I was a little off. It now, on reassessment, it now seems like
it's 11.5
11.
Out of 12.
By the way, the UK ticks quite a few of the boxes.
Well, you guys have the Irish to blame for that.
Oh no, the EU.
That's a joke, by the way.
As I understand it, Bojo blames Labour and the European Union.
I'm going to be positive. I was negative, positive. I'm going to go. It's like, what is amazing, and I think every day people should realize that it is a gift that Northern Ireland isn't on fire.
No.
Be thankful for small freaking things that Northern Ireland is not on fire.
At least not yet.
Yeah, at least for the moment. Oh, yeah. No, those are really those 12 signs are sobering, I think, for a lot of people that pay attention even slightly to a lot of the politics in the US, especially right now. Again, it's, for a few years it was, everybody knew, like, your buddy always comes in and tells you about his girlfriend and she just happens to go to a different school or whatever, right? Okay, no big deal. Like, we know that's him, right? But like, there's always that one person that talks a bunch of stuff and you're like, nah, we just don't believe anything they say. But at a certain point, it's like, Like, we have to believe them, because at first, okay, we get it. You're just talking a big game. You got a massive trampoline in your backyard with a super huge swimming pool. Okay, no big deal. And then you're like, man, I'm so cool. Like, I stole this guy's car last week. And we're like, okay, whatever, dude, whatever. And then he's like, I'm so cool. Look at this gun that I brought to school. And it's like, oh, no, 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 no. See, this is okay. This is bad. This is bad. This is bad. And right now, the GOP, for the last few years, that's been their rhetoric. It starts with the, oh, I have a girlfriend, she's at another school, and you're like, okay, it's not really that big of a deal either way, but whatever. He's like, oh man, look at this cool thing I have. Oh, okay, whatever. So at first they said, oh well, they're coming to take your jobs. We're like, oh okay, that's not great, but it's not that big of a deal. Then they said, oh well, we got to protect women, and we're like, well, we know you don't really mean that, but okay, it's not a big deal. And now they're actively installing hundreds of judges, right? Yeah. Now they've acted. I mean, that was one of the biggest things that the Trump administration did. All the executive orders, no problem. They'll be signed out over and over and over, back and forth by president after president, like they have been for 30 years. But the hundreds and hundreds of justices now that are all throughout the courts, we're fucked. We're fucked on that.
I mean, not easy to get rid of them.
Yeah. I mean, that's why Andrew Seidel is one of the best constitutional lawyers in the United States, works with Freedom from Religion Foundation, and actively believes the only way we are going to make some really significant changes is by increasing the size of the federal judiciary and the Supreme Court bench.
Well, I mean, the best thing that Biden could have done is to make a hard concerted push for Puerto Rico to become a state if they wanted, and they have voted that they wanted to become a state, and let Washington D.C. There were a lot of people talking about stacking the Supreme Court, and the best thing you could have done is to push for D.C. statehood and Puerto Rican statehood. If you could have gotten a cutout for the filibuster for that, you get a straight 50-51 vote, and I don't care how much money you have to give Joe Manchin or Kristen Sinema. If you could have gotten Puerto Rico and D.C. in, that would have been better than 50 judges on the Supreme Court that would vote for us. Yeah. But no.
I'm okay with both. I'm okay with both of them.
Sure. Yeah, it's not either one.
Right. Let's get them both going and just cement some of these things into law that we thought we didn't need to cement into law. Like, who would have thought our government would one day have to seriously consider writing a law that codifies that, your own body and like the medical decisions get made with it, they are actually your decision. Who would have thought we'd have literally had to have? But yeah, because this court is Christo-fascist and they're not interested in the rule of law. They're interested in their own agenda.
On that happy note, I'm going to have to run. Because you said the magic word, Christo-fascist.
Yeah, I call them Jesus Nazis, but
Jesus Nazis, Christo-fascists, whatever you want to call them. Thank you for having me on, Cindy Plaza. And once again, Secularity, you say that you like Tennessee, but there's always safety up here.
I appreciate that. That, man.
All right, take care, everyone. Thanks again for having me.
Thanks for showing up.
You want me to say anything crazy before I leave? You got anything else you want me to say, or no, nothing? All right.
Just plug your channel.
Oh, my channel is Laughing in Disbelief. I'm also a blogger though they don't want to admit it, I'm also on Only Sky, and I'm a humor blogger over there, and I write all kinds of funny stories, and make jokes, and make memes. So Laughing in Disbelief on Facebook, Laughing in Disbelief on YouTube, and I'm on Only Sky with my own name, Andrew Hall. So hey, check me out, and thanks again. I appreciate it, everyone.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye. See you, man.
Yeah, we were speaking about fascism, and I always wondered why this word doesn't scare the right that much in the U.S. And maybe one of the reasons is because they tend to use socialism as an insult. So they believe that when someone tells them that they're fascists, it's just an insult, like socialism. So it doesn't mean anything to them. Do you think it's likely to be the case?
Yes, I think that definitely is a part of it. I think there's also, the aspect of the simple fact that they aren't concerned if ultimately, so if somebody were to sit down and say, hey, look, your pastor at your church just said this is how they believe the United States government should run, right? Like we should have this law or change this or not allow or do force people to whatever. And that actually is completely in line with these things that we understand that is fascism. I think for a good handful of people, their response would just be like, yeah, but it's the right thing to do. Like it's God's will, like it's the right belief system. And so absolutely, like if it happens to line up with fascism, well, then there are some, again, in their eyes, there are some aspects of fascism that are correct, right? Because it's how my God told me to do stuff. I also think, yeah, there is just the complete lack of understanding of what it is, because in the United States, there hasn't been the direct experience that many other places in the world has had. Like we really have we've never been in which is similar to why the populism of Trump was so enjoyed by the right wing of the United States, was because we had never been in a place like many of our South American friends, where they had a populist, they had a hardcore populist government for a while, whether it was left wing or right wing, it doesn't matter, because once you get to these extremes, you circle round again, politically speaking, and you just become an asshole that just has a slightly different flavor of to it. And it's like, that's not, that's not enough meaningful of a distinction for it to be worthwhile to like sit down and philosophize about. But yeah, we haven't had that direct everyday what it would be like to live in a society where fascism is the number one system controlling us, or populism. And because other places in the world have, it is actually something that's scary. Like for us, World War II is really just a big victory lap for the USA. Like that's the way that we talk about it in a lot of schools is kind of this, oh no, Europe and the rest of the world were having troubles and the United States came through and we stopped them and we put the bad guy in the corner and time out, and everybody loved America ever since. And that really is kind of how we approach this. And instead of saying, hey, look at the ramifications of what living in a country like this are. Look at the atrocities that are committed on everyday normal people for no reason other than the fact that they aren't the type of person that big dog on high wants in their country. So yeah, there's ignorance, and then there's I guess just lack of experience, which is still kind of ignorance. So maybe it's just ignorance.
I mean, part of this I understand. I mean, after World War II, Eisenhower knew what he was about. Of course, he fought the Nazis. And, well, you had a few presidents after who fought in the Second World War, who at least were reasonably in the know of what it was about. But now those have gone. I mean, I think most of the World War II veterans are dead by now. And so that knowledge, the visceral, been there, done that kind of knowledge is gone. Yeah. In my nation as well. I mean, nowadays the Nazis are in parliament again. I mean, they don't call themselves Nazis, of course, but they make the same sounds. They look the same. They are the same.
Yeah, you're in the Netherlands, right, Hein?
Yeah.
What's his name? Geert van
Geert Wilders.
Okay, I'll never be able to pronounce it correctly, but I think we're thinking of the same person.
The one with the big blonde hair.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, he's compared to the really bad one, not so bad. I mean, he's bad, but his agenda is more anti-Muslims than downright fascism.
So he's not as Nazi as it gets, as you're saying. You're saying there's
man.
He's more racist than fascist.
Okay, well,
the other thing
we have Thierry Baudet, and he's the real thing.
I'm gonna have to look him up. Yeah,
his party is called Forum for Democracy, which of course it isn't.
Wow.
Yeah, the only thing that the other thing the US doesn't have and we do is physical reminders. Like in France, you can go and visit cities where Nazis put people in a church and burn the church, or they just kill everyone in the village, or you have those things. You have concentration camps in Germany and in Eastern Europe. You have political figures that we still talk about that were helpful with Germany. So we have this constant reminder of history that the US doesn't have. I think in the US, Nazi is equivalent to concentration camps. And so maybe that's also one of the reasons why they don't think what they are is Nazism, because they don't want concentration camps. They don't realize the steps you take to go there. But yeah, we have this constant reminder of World War I and World War II in our locations in Europe.
And we've done a really good job of in the US, we've done a really good job of absolving the collective consciousness of our citizens, I think, on a lot of different avenues. Like when it seems that we as a collection, as a nation, right, kind of back certain policies. Like now, sure, there's a lot of people out there who are really and studied and focused on the internment camps of the 1940s for Japanese Americans, like people that had, been born in the US, not like they just flew over from Japan 2 weeks ago, but have literally lived like their whole freaking lives in the country. But we did a really good job of kind of not really erasing it from our memory, but just changing we just straight up said like, hey, this wasn't as bad as you thought it was, and we fixed it. Actually, everything's good. Like, yeah, okay, it wasn't great, but it wasn't that bad, and we'll move on, and we'll be just fine. Because when the Trump administration started building border camps and we're putting hundreds and hundreds and thousands of children into cages, and there were a couple of people that initially looked at that and said, this is Nazi Germany, right? And there were many people on the left and the right who then stood up and said, hey, actually, I may not agree with this, but let's not make a comparison to fascists or anything. And it's like, but it is. Yeah. This is directly out of the playbook. So yeah, I think we've done a really good job of forcing a different memory of what happened 40, 50, 100 years ago. And that has been really pervasive. Like the intense nationalism that exists in the United States, according to many of my friends like y'all from around the world, is just really not there. Like I wake up in the morning and I just think, USA, USA, and I can't stop it. I can't force myself out of it. It's just, yeah. If somebody lights off a firework tomorrow, like I'm just instantly going to be like, "Woo, America!" But
Yeah, I think that's a video worth doing. The comparison between what the US think they are and what they actually are.
yeah,
There's a lot of videos out there where an American reacts to a video um, showing that how bad the US is at something. There's a lot of those. I almost did a video about this a couple of weeks ago, and maybe I will at some point. But I'm walking a very uh, very thin line at the moment, where I'm afraid that by criticizing the US too much, I'm going to be seen as anti-American, and that's not what I am. So I'm trying to go easy on this.
just tell them you have American friends like me, and then everything will be okay. You know, like they should be okay after that. Like, no, I swear I know an American. Like, he told me all this stuff.
Yeah.
Oh.
But yeah, no matter what metric you use to define which country is better than another one, basically the US is worse.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah.
Well, I know at least one metric where the USA is really the number one. People per capita in prison.
Oh yeah, we're good at that. We're also very, very high up there. By the way, I think there's only a few countries, I want to say, like China, North Korea, Iran, and Russia, Saudi Arabia as well, by the way, that beat us or fight with us for the amount of prisoners that we execute every year. So we're really doing well there, I guess. Yeah. So number one in the world. So yeah. But everything else, I mean, reading comprehension, basic mathematics.
Not so good.
Yeah. Nope. Household
education,
income,
health,
all worse.
Decreasing life expectancy.
Yeah. Though that one, depending on where you are in the country, that could actually be a blessing, right? Like,
okay.
Pretty much everything that's related to health, whether it's infant mortality, birth mortality as well for the mothers, everything that's related to health, the US is bad at it.
Yeah, I gotta say that of all the health statistics, that really blew me away a few years ago when I saw a really long study on mother mortality in the United States. I was blown away to think of that many women are giving birth and they're dying. They're just dying in the United States. Like that it just blew my mind. And it's literally just because we're just not providing the basics half the time, and the other half of the time is racism. So that's
and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
I was rather shocked to learn that, well, simply giving birth to a child costs a fortune in the US. In just hospital care, medical care. I don't even exactly know how that works, but we're talking about something like $50,000.
Yeah.
Just to give birth.
Yep. Which for many people is a year's income.
Yeah.
The whole year's worth of their income. And again, in the meantime, throughout the entire pregnancy, you really are not provided much. You're not provided much help in terms of vitamins or paying for doctor's visits or anything like that. There are some programs, don't get me wrong. It's not like it's nothing, but at the same time, again, we're almost halfway through 2022, And you're
Yeah.
telling me that there are dozens and dozens all the time of pregnant people just dying
Yeah.
from birth?
Yeah.
I thought this was something that affected humanity like 2,000 years ago.
And
I
of
thought-
course, soon the return of the coat hanger.
Yeah, well, right, because that was the biggest thing that I said when that draft, overturning abortion, Roe versus Wade and stuff, when that was leaked initially, my first thing was this is not an if people die. This is a when. This is something that is just outright it will happen. I just don't know if it's going to happen this day on the calendar or this day on the calendar,
Yeah.
but it's going to. And that's infuriating to me that one of the supporting decisions to overturn Roe versus Wade, to put the lives of so many American citizens at risk, is we need a domestic supply of babies. Don't have enough white American babies, apparently. That's what the whole world needs, is just more US babies. So that is absolutely asinine to me, especially when we are outright more than happy. So of the states that have trigger laws, Tennessee being one of them, of the states that have the trigger law in place, that the moment the Supreme Court ruling comes into effect, abortion will be made illegal. Those are the states with some of the least amount of funding for their public education.
Of course.
Yeah, we did a show on this very topic last week on the Women Atheist Unload show.
Oh,
This baby need. It's funny because on one hand you have this argument, and on the other hand you have, like you said earlier, this huge cost of having a baby, and you have this great replacement theory that says that the white people don't do enough babies, but it costs too much. People who don't want them do them anyway, so they won't be taken care of. They're not, the mother die during pregnancy. The kids are not treated properly, so they die also. The infant death rate is higher in the US than in most other civilized countries. So yeah, it's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah. And it is. It's not a. It isn't me just being radical. It isn't just me trying to be polarizing or anything. There is a group of people in the United States right now, politically speaking, who apparently are really, really comfortable with average people dying in the streets.
Yeah.
In various ways, various reasons. And that is the Republican Party. The Republican Party has outright thrown out some of the most fundamental, basic aspects of what our government is supposed to be about. We have not matched up to the lofty ideals that our country was supposedly founded on. We have never meeting those standards, but we have progressively focused on them and moved towards them in various ways. And there is now a group of people who are actively saying, I don't care about any of them. I want my specific, super partisan, super bullshit ideas to be in charge of all of you. That's the Republican Party right now. And that is insanely frustrating, because it literally is the pigeon playing chess with you. Like, how do you keep playing the game at that point when it just has literally repeatedly crapped all over the board? You can no longer just be like, well, rook to ease. You can't do that anymore. No. But I am not a fan of some violent overthrow or anything. I'm not a fan of just rounding GOP senators up and putting them in jail. Not in the slightest. That is absolutely the wrong way. But if they're willing to go almost as far as that, basically just outright dehumanizing of people to the point that mobs will start and just taking action into their own hands, because we've seen this in other countries. It isn't like the United States is in a vacuum. Other countries' politicians have done this, and we have seen these results.
No.
What it means then is we have to make sure on the left that we are a hell of a lot more loud about it. And if somebody wants to make some snide fucking comment at a public meeting, then every single second of your time to speak is calling that shit out. And we've got to do that. And I'm saying me, I'm saying this for me more than anybody else on my side right now, like, because I need to be more motivated. I need to be more active in doing things. Yes, already there's a handful of different things I can point to, but I have to get out and knock doors. I have to get out and put the signs up and tell people why this policy is important. Because without that, it's not hyperbole. They will be coming for everybody that does not 100% lockstep agree.
Exactly.
So, yeah. I know it's not the most happiest of sentiment.
Yeah, I was going to say, on that positive note, thank you guys for showing up. It was a very interesting talk.
Yes.
I hope we will do that again. I'm still trying to figure out where I'm going with my channel, because I've had some issues lately, and some of the things are hard for me to do, and that's a bit easier. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But thank you for being here.
Thank you for hosting.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So next week, well, tomorrow and next week, we will have shows on the Women Atheist Unload, which is always on Saturdays at 3:30 p.m. Central. I will be on the nonprofits on the 11th of June, and I think that's all for the moment. So thank you everyone in the chat. It was very lively. I like that, and still be very respectful. So thank you all for that too. If you want to support my channel, you can go to the link tree and buy a couple books from my Amazon wishlist. I haven't monetized my channel yet. I don't know if I will ever do it, but in the meantime, that's what you can do if you want to help me. Thanks, Kat, for that. I hope we will see each other again soon. And in the meantime, I wish you all a very, very good weekend. Bye.
Merci. Au revoir.